Divide and conquer is a classic strategy for solving complex problems. In software, we often talk about iterative and incremental development, which is basically divide and conquer for a design problem. So in this video, I'm going to show you what incremental development looks like using C# to complete the Christmas Song Code Kata. And at the same time, I'm going to explain how I'm doing that and the important development heuristics that you should know about. Hi, I'm Emily Bache. I'm a software developer and creator of Salman Coaching. Welcome to my channel. This video is sponsored by Tuple, who make an app for remote pair and ensemble programming for both Mac OS and Windows. And I'd like to show you just how smooth it is. So I'm going to call up my friend Jack to help me with this bit of code. Hi, Jack. So I can just share my screen with one click and then he can look at the code and help me out. Yeah, I spotted something he wants to change there. And Jack can just dive right in and start editing in my machine on my code. And we can collaborate really well. So do check it out. Go to their website. There's a link in the show notes. This is a fun, Christmas-themed coding exercise. But don't be deceived by how simple the code kata looks. It's that very simplicity that allows me to focus your attention on the way I'm approaching the problem. Because in TDD, there are several heuristics, rules of thumb, that can help you to break a problem into pieces, divide and conquer, which is what TDD is actually all about, building a solution test by test with a great testable design. Let's dive into the code. I've set up a new project here with an empty Christmas song class. I've got an empty program that just says hello world and an empty test case. On the right here, I've got the description of the exercise with the words of the song that I need to generate in my program. So it's a very jolly Christmas song. On the first day of Christmas, my true love sent to me a partridge in a pear tree. And it goes on like this, kind of strange gifts. And there are 12 verses, one for each day of Christmas. But they all start with very similar lines about which day of Christmas it is and what gifts you're going to get sent. So here we are, and we get to the 12th verse. It's still the same, the first bit. And then the next part of the verse, well, the last line is always the first gift that you got sent, and then it just kind of adds to the list. So all the verses end with a partridge in a pear tree, but each one adds an additional gift. So writing this out is the task that we've set ourselves. So I'm going to begin by writing a test list. And as I did this bit of analysis, I've realized, well, the first verse header would be a good place to start because it's very similar also in the other verses. So if I can do the first verse, hopefully I can do the others. And once I've got the header, maybe I can do the body of the verse, which is the list of gifts. So the second verse and then any verse. So at that point, I can hopefully create both halves of any verse. And then what am I going to do? Well, then I need to probably do the whole song because I can do all the verses. And then I just want to print that to the console. So that seems like a reasonable place to start for a test list. So that's the first step of TDD, I think. A bit of analysis, work out where you're going to start. What's your first test? So let's write that test then. The first verse header, and I'm going to have an expected string, and I'm going to use these multi-line strings you get in C# these days. And then I can just assert that the string that I generate from my Christmas song, I need a method name here, verse header for the first verse. That seems like a reasonable interface to that, and check it matches what I expect. So that's marked in red because it doesn't exist, but now I can go and create it, get the interface right, and then throwing an exception, actually a reasonable initial implementation. So let's run that and see it fail. That's the red step in TDD, and as we expected, we got the not implemented exception. So all going to plan here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fake it. This is the simplest thing I could think of to make the test pass, with just to hard code the expected answer. And that, of course, works. So I've got a green test now, but I've totally cheated. So once you've done the simplest thing that could possibly work and faked it, the next move is often triangulation. So that's what I'm going to try next. I'll just make a commit because I have made some progress. I've created a new method, and my tests are passing. But let's move on now with triangulation and create the test for the second verse. That's the next simplest case. And then I just need to change a couple of things, and it's the same test. So this is the point with triangulation. It's the same test, just with different data to force you to generalize the solution. So now I can very easily fake it again and cheat. Do the simplest thing is just put an if statement and hard code the header of the second verse. And I mean, yeah, it's not good enough yet, but I've got my test green, so now I can work on refactoring away all of the duplication that I've got here. So the duplication is basically this word here. It's either first or second. So let's create a variable for that. The verse name, and I can initialize that to first, but if I go into this if statement, then it could be second. There we go. So just adding that variable won't do anything, test still passing, but now I can start to use it in my code. So that should still work. Yeah. And now I have generalized the code a little bit, and that return statement I actually want that at the end. So just copy that there. And is everything still working? Yep. Okay, so that's looking like there's a bit less duplication, but it's looking unnecessarily difficult to generalize. So I'm going to put these in a list because having if statements for every number is a bit silly. So let's have a list which I can index by number and put the first and the second in it. So just adding that list didn't break anything, but now I can start to use my list. So I can look up the name of a verse from its number. And let's see, does that work? Oh, no, I've made an off by one error. I need to -1, not +1, I think. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, and now I can get the verse name from the number just by looking it up in the list like that. And that's looking a lot more healthy. So I think my triangulation is worked now. And but I need to do any verse header. So let's just speed through this. There we are. So now I've got all the numbers up to 12th verse. And I think I can now handle any verse. But maybe I should just confirm that by putting in a test for an interesting verse. How about the 12th verse? Just to make sure that I have got no more off by one errors. So if I can get the 12th verse out, all right, then that should be a good sign. Yeah, there we are. Cool. So now I can do any verse, and I've got tests for that. Let's celebrate by making a commit. Yep, so that's any verse header done. So now I'm just reviewing my tests and realizing I probably don't need all of these tests because I was using triangulation. Actually, they're all the same test, so I'm just going to keep one of them. I'll delete the others. And that's a typical move with triangulation. You find that you needed them to generalize, but then you don't need them anymore once you've done the generalization. I've shown you several development heuristics already in this video. You may have noticed start with a test list, do the simplest thing that could possibly work, triangulation, and I've got several more of those heuristics coming up later in the demo. If you'd like to learn more and improve the way that you write code, I've written a guide to heuristics in test-driven development, which is free when you sign up for the Saman Coaching newsletter. Check that out on samancoaching.org. And of course, don't forget, subscribe to my channel and like the video. Okay, so let's work on the next feature, the first verse body, which is the simplest verse, and it just has one line in the body, the partridge in the pear tree. So let's write a test for that. It's the first verse body. And the expected value was that partridge, and I'm going to ask for verse number 1, the verse body. So that's a new method. It's marked in red there. So I'll just create that so that the code will compile. And I need to make sure it names the variables correctly. So the default is just going to throw an exception. So when I run the test, it throws the exception. And now I can write the implementation. And the simplest thing that could possibly work is, again, I'm going to fake it. A partridge in a pear tree hard-coded there. And that makes my test pass. So I'm kind of crossing that off my list again, although I faked it. And I'm going to make that commit. I've got the first verse body working. And then I'm looking at this, and the next test on my list is to do the second verse. But at this point, I'm feeling a bit impatient. I reckon I could do the whole first verse. So let's add a next item to my list, a whole first verse. So this is another thing about when you're doing TDD, your test list is absolutely flexible and under your control, and it's fine to change direction in the middle and decide you suddenly want to do the whole first verse, even though you faked it on the first verse body. I think it's enough that we can then kind of drive further towards a solution. So I'm going to actually write this test now that's going to join the body and the header together for verse 1. So I'm going to create a new method verse that just takes the verse number. And it's only going to work for verse 1 because I've only got the verse body working for verse 1. But it's kind of driving me closer to where I want to be. So there it's failing. That's the red step. And now I can make this pass. And I'm not going to fake it. So I'm going to actually just write the code because I've got the verse header. And then I just need a multi-line string of the verse header and then the verse body. And that code, I think, will work. So let's run the tests. Yes. Although I never quite believe it when it passes first time. So I'm just going to make a deliberate mistake here. Let's put an extra comma in and check that it really is running the code. And yeah. There's my extra comma. Okay. Implementing verse was dead easy once I've got a verse header and a verse body method. Maybe I should turn back again and see if I can actually implement that verse body for more than just verse 1, because I have faked it. But first, let's just cross that whole first verse off the list there and make a commit. So we can actually do the first bit of the song now. Okay, but let's turn our attention now to the harder problem of how do we get the second verse body, which is the next simplest. It's just 2 lines, and we add 2 turtle doves to our partridge in a pear tree. Okay, so here I should have a failing test. Yep, there we go. And if I go and look at the implementation, so how am I going to do this? So at this point, I'm like, maybe I need to take advantage of one of the other moves in TDD. I think I may have tried a step that was a little too large. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to mark this test I just wrote as skipped because I need to write an easier test. Because this step that I was trying to take was too big, so I need to think of a smaller step. And I've been giving this some thought, and I reckon the reason it's too big a step is because I both have to discover the line for the next gift and kind of concatenate it with the previous line in the right order and stuff. So let's just focus on the increment of just getting all the gifts, just a list of all of the gifts that for the whole song. And then it'll be easier to pick out the ones I need for this verse. So my assertion is going to look something like, well, I'm going to get 12 items in my list of all gifts. So I need a variable for my all gifts, and it's going to be something that I get from the Christmas song, an all gifts method. And so let's just bring that into being. Well, actually, no, let's just have another assertion, because just that it's a list with 12 items isn't really good enough. The first item in the list has got to be a partridge in a pear tree, because that's the first gift that we get given. And then, let's create that method. So it's going to return a list of strings. So the default implementation throws an exception, so I should have a failing test now, just 1 failing test. If I hadn't skipped that other test that I was working on, then I'd have 2 failing tests, and that might confuse me. So I'm just going to make sure I've only got 1 for my new test for all the gifts. And I've spotted, of course, that I have a list here of all the 12 gifts in the problem description. So a simpler way to turn them into a list is to put this string into my code, and then I can turn that into a list fairly easily using split, just splitting on new line. So if I split that list of gifts by new line and then make sure it returns it as a list of strings and not an array, that should do the trick. Oh, except it didn't. My test is failing. I was expecting 12 drummers. Oh no, I've got my actual and expected the wrong way around. Yeah, so I've got my list in the wrong order. Of course. So I want the first element to be the partridge, not the 12 drummers. So I'm just going to reverse this list, and that should perhaps sort out the problem. Yes, there we go. So now I've got the list of all the gifts, and the gifts are in the right order, and I can just fix that assertion so that the expected value is first. So that nearly tripped me up there. but I think I got the idea. Okay, so now I can go back and work on that test that I had skipped because it was too big a step. Because now I've got a list of all the gifts, I think I should be able to tackle this one. So let's go back here to my code for the verse body. So basically I want to get all the gifts, and then I need to just take the first elements of it up to verse number. So I can get just for verse 2, the first two elements of this list. So up to and not including the verse number. And then I need to return that as a string. So if I do string.join on new line, that should give me the right kind of formatting for my gifts. Let's try that. Didn't work. So having a look at what I actually got, I got my gifts in the wrong order. So it looks nearly right. I just got them in the wrong order. Okay, so that's easy to fix. I'm just going to have to reverse my list. In fact, I'm now reversing this list in 2 places. But I think it's worth it because it means that I can easily get out the correct ones when I need them here. Great, so that actually fixes it and my tests are all passing. I've got the verse body working with the help of my new all gifts method. So let's just make a commit. Actually, no, before we make a commit, let's just cross that off our list. And then we can write a good message using the test list as the message. Actually, we've done any verse body as well. And the next thing on my list is the whole song. Am I ready for that? Actually, I'm going to look at the using it from the console. So basically, the interface I want here is I'm going to construct my Christmas song, and then I'm going to write the, I want it to print all the whole song. So I need a function for that, a method on song for printing everything. And that doesn't exist at the moment. In fact, I don't want write line. I want just a write because that's going to be a multi-line string. Okay, so I can create that method now. It's going to return a string. And it's going to be a string that contains the entire text of the whole song. So let's just kind of write something random there so I can just check that the main interface, the main console interface works. Yeah, so it calls my print all method and I get that random text song here. But that's not quite enough of a proof of concept. Actually, I want to check that I can print a multi-line string here. I should be able to return multiple lines in my song and have it print them all correctly on their own lines. So let's try just changing that. Yeah, so obviously that's not the correct lines, but I can now got that I can run from the console and I can print a multi-line string. So I think that if I can get the right string returned by print all, then the console part will work. So that was me just kind of doing a bit of manual testing of the actual interface in order to make sure that I've got a method with the right signature that I can now test drive. So that's my job now, to write an actual test for print all. So this one is going to produce a multi-line string for the entire song. I think I've got all the pieces I need to be able to do that now. So I'm going to construct a Christmas song and call the print all. That's the actual result. And then I need to have an expected result as well. So in these cases, I think it's probably useful just to check the first line of the multi-line string is correct. And so result dot, actually no, I need to get the lines out. So let's split it into lines and get the first line, and then check the first line and the last line. I could check all the lines with an approval test, but hey, I think this is going to be enough. If I've got the first and the last line right, then I'm probably okay. Yep, so that's failing. I'm getting this random string that I was just returning before instead of the actual song. So let's just see if we can get this working. So let's get all the verses. So I need an enumerable, a range over all of the integers from 1 to 12. And then I can make a mapping over that with a little lambda here so that I can get the verse for that number. And then the tool is just prompting me a little bit. It's saying, oh, I could convert that to a method group. Okay, let's try that. So I've got a mapping over the range of numbers to get all the 12 verses, and then I just need to join those with new line to make the whole song. All the verses joined with a new line. That should do the trick. So let's try that. Okay, so I'm going to run my test now. Did I get this right? Oh no, I'm getting an argument out of range error. I've made an off by 1 error somewhere. Oh, of course. When I asked for the verse, it's the I'm starting from 1, not 0. So I'm enumerating over the numbers 0 to 11, and then I need to add 1 to that in order to get the verse. So it's a 0. It's an off by 1 error. Okay, so I need to change that back into a normal lambda and do I plus 1 to select the correct verse. Oh, right, great. I think that's worked. So let's just run the whole program now. My tests are all passing, and the output from the program, and it's not quite. The first and the last line are right, but I haven't got enough new lines between verses. Nearly there. Okay, let's just put in another new line and see if we can get this. Yes, that looks a bit better. Great. I think I'm done. I've got the whole song being printed out there from the first verse to the last with all the gifts in the right order and the new lines in the right places. Excellent. So let's just review my code and my tests. I've got, some of these methods might not need to be public, but still, I think the implementation is looking reasonable. I haven't duplicated any of the strings that are part of the song, at least. Yeah. So the implementation looks all right. The tests, are there any of these tests that I don't need? Oh, I should cross some things off my list there. I've done the whole song now. So some of these tests are kind of similar, but maybe I can delete that one. I did some triangulation there and I don't need all of the versions now. Yeah. So I'm quite happy with my tests, I think. I'll keep these all as regression tests now. And let's just make a final check of the overall program. Yeah, it's just printing everything. Great. I'll just finish by making a commit for the whole song. Next time you're working on a coding problem, see if you can use some of these heuristics, like triangulation, and do the simplest thing that could possibly work. Identify increments, work in smaller steps. I think you'll find it's actually less stressful to work that way and more likely to result in a good design than trying to solve everything at once. Happy coding!